everyone, I'm Rachel Lang, the Outreach Director for NCGR, and today I am going to be talking in conversation with Christopher Renstrom. Hi, Chris.
Hi, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
Admiring how beautiful and lovely and shining and wonderful you look.
Aw, thank you for making me blush. And I have been admiring you, not just for how beautiful and wonderful and shining you look, but also because I just got your most recent book, The Cosmic Calendar, which just came out yesterday. And even though this will be posted a little bit later, I'm encouraging everyone to get this book. It is really good. You just have so many insights, so many ideas that are fresh, that are new, that are things that we haven't seen in astrology. And so I wanted to have a conversation about this and about some of the topics that you share. And we'll get to your book in just a minute, but we have a lot of beginners and a lot of people who are just new to astrology. And so I wanted to hear your story of how you got started.
How much time do you have? No. How did I get started in astrology? It had always been sort of around in my household, not, like I didn't have a relative who was an astrologer or anything like that. Actually, I had relatives who talked to the dead, but that's a different thing. But it had always been like around like a coffee table book or something like that. And my mom was always like, let's read signs, and so I would like pick up and read signs to her or whatever. I've got 4 brothers, a kind of big family. And so, we'd read signs when she was cooking dinner or something like that. But that was neither here nor there. I mean, it was around, but not really, identified or connected to me. But when I moved to New York City at the age of 18 to attend the Juilliard School of Drama, one of my friends there in class said, hey, I got this pamphlet of like someone who's teaching astrology on the Upper West Side. Do you want to go? And I'm like, sure, because you're 18. So you're like, sure. And so like you sort of show up, and there was this marvelous woman who was sort of short with dark brown hair, and she smoked constantly, and she had a big straw-backed chair or whatever, and we would sort of sit there and take notes and do charts. And she was a social worker, and all the charts were unnamed, and she would bring in the charts of like thieves and extortionists and arsonists and things like that, and we'd have to like look for signatures, and we'd have to like look at the Mars and look at the Pluto and look at the Saturn, and she would just sort of like very patiently listen, and then she'd be like, you're correct. That is the astrological chart of a serial killer.
Oh my God, I love it. You had a very
Yeah.
scorpionic entrance into astrology.
Right, exactly. But one of the great messages she had was that she would say, I want you to study the books, but I want you off book, as soon as possible, which I could relate to as an acting student at the time. It's like lines memorized off book. So she always wanted us applying what we had read from a book to speaking in class. And one of the big things that she really talked to me about, and she always encouraged people to do readings off the bat, even if we were like, well, I'm not sure, whatever, but she's like, read for your friends, because she knew like you're not gonna, so you read for your friends. And that taught you how to speak the astrology. It taught you how to read signals. It taught you like, how to sort of bring the conversation back to the chart instead of letting it, get taken away somewhere else. And so this combination of really learning, to identify these charts, as an arsonist or an extortionist or whatever, plus also being able to be off book with astrology and to be able to talk about it. And then the third thing she really taught was listening, that a client will speak their chart. So, don't sit across your client and be like someone on a quiz show ready to hit the buzzer and say, what is, Mesopotamia? It was like, listen to your client, look at the chart, and let that chart be the guide. Let that chart be the map of the reading and the conversation. So these were extraordinary things that I learned, when I was young. I was 18, 19, and that I was able to apply to practice right after I graduated from college. And I think it's an important thing to be able to speak one-on-one in person with someone. And I'm not sure whether that's done a lot, you know, with social media and things like that these days, but it's very, it's a very, at the very least, it's a very important learning experience.
Mhm. Right, absolutely. And, you know, I think that so much of that conversational style gets translated into your writing. Um, I have been reading your horoscopes and for years, and really love your writing, your writer's voice. And so, can you talk a little bit about that transition that you made from doing charts and being in you know, one-on-one sessions to really translating that into to more of your writing?
It took place via Tarot. I mean, when I graduated, when I graduated NYU for playwriting, I'd switched over to NYU. You're not going to get a lot of jobs as a playwright, you know, and certainly not like in the 1980s in the East Village. And so, but I had been reading cards during school and things like this. And as I was remarking with you earlier, Rachel, you know, my writing in school was like not really good. In fact, it was like really bad. But what I learned when I would, you know, reach out to expand client base, I guess is what one would say. Actually, what I was doing was I was reading cards at New York discotheques and dance clubs from 10 at night to about 4 in the morning. And if it was an after club, 8 in the morning. And so you meet a lot of different types of people who are not from your neighborhood or from your background. And because it's a discotheque, maybe not your same state of mind. So you're handling a lot of different situations.
Uh-huh.
It was just so wonderful in terms of like learning how to, again, do that conversation. And so Tarot is much more explicitly a storytelling, or it's storytelling of a different sort. I equate Tarot with poetry and astrology with narrative prose.
Ooh, I
That's kind
love that. Yeah.
of, I make the break there. And so that taught me voice to speak. And so when I got my first astrology job with Allure magazine, writing a monthly horoscope, I was able to apply, you know, that speaking voice to writing the predictions. And I had a fantastic editor-in-chief, Linda Wells, and she was like, "We really want you to come on board for this astrology column. We're really psyched about it. We're really excited. Please don't bore us with all those astrological details with that weird language that you guys go into." I was like, "Oh yeah, we're, you know, Saturn is square." She's like, "Yeah, boring. Just cut through it, you know, get to what you want to say." And at first I was like, how can you possibly write such a thing, you know? But I realized, oh my God, that was like such a great thing, because how many horoscope columns do you read where it's like they're listing off the side of the cereal box? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
this is the transit or whatever. And so this idea of like, get to the message. And then I was allowed to sort of like sprinkle in some aspects and things like that. But it really taught me, you know, do that interpretation, serve the interpretation, put it on paper, and who are you talking to? You
Mhm.
know, and when you're writing for a big publication, like for instance, Allure magazine, you're talking to, I think circulation then was like 1 something million, but you know, 1 something million of people you're never going to see or talk to, but somehow it has to be able to speak to them. So those were like really, really good skills, picking up the conversational style, and then also learning to cut through what can be astrology's almost worst enemy with writing, which I think is all the aspects and stuff. You come in with that interpretation ready to go, not, you know, constructing it type of thing.
Mhm.
That was a big thing I learned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would think that that would be so helpful for for new astrologers um, who are getting started writing their own horoscopes or starting to create content. I mean, I think now we have a more educated audience, just in general. People who actually, I think there are people who really want to know like some of the foundational aspects that we're talking about and some of those things. But I think that there's a fine line that anyone writing horoscope columns or astrology columns would need to balance right now.
Yeah, I mean, are you inhabiting your words?
Mm-hmm.
Using words, you know, throwing them onto paper and hoping something will stick? Or are you inhabiting them? Do you have a message? Do you have something that you want to come across? You know, I mean, the wonderful thing that can be very liberating, you know, I mean, I personally think everyone should have like a sun sign column that you do for your blog. I mean, whether it's monthly, weekly, daily, it's wonderful. It's a great discipline. It teaches great practice, just like a musician playing at a piano or whatever during the day. It keeps everything honed and going. And you can always better yourself as you're doing it. And there's no better friend to a writer. And Rachel, I know you know this, although you're going to be like, but but a deadline, right? Your deadline is your best friend. Okay,
Right.
we curse it and say horrible things about it, but a deadline is your best friend. And when you're writing astrology, which has the shelf life of milk, okay, you're under a constant, deadline. And so there's always the press to write. But the liberating thing is, guess what? There's another day to write. There's another week to write. There's another month to write. You don't have to get it right, every time you put pen to paper or something like that. We happen to be writing in a genre which really serves the art that we practice. And that also allows us to improve as writers and communicators.
Absolutely. And your column, you still write for the San Francisco Chronicle, is that correct?
Still do.
And for rulingplanets.com, which is your website. You have daily, monthly, your weekly, daily, weekly.
That's weekly. And then I write for Astro Hub, Astrology Hub, which is run by Amanda Poole Walsh. I write for them. And I'm back to writing books. I used to write for a lot of other people, but now I'm back to writing books. So
good. Well, maybe that's a good segue then. I think into the Cosmic Calendar, which is your latest book, and and one thing I love about, first of all, I just got the book yesterday, so I haven't finished it, but I know. But I've actually gotten pretty far in reading it just because it's so good, and it's a page turner. It's an astrological page turner.
Yay!
But one thing I really like about this book is, like I said, it's got fresh ideas. It has new ways of framing astrology, and one of those is looking at your chart as your personal calendar to see like optimum times of the year, challenging times of the year. So maybe could you just talk a little bit about the book and about the idea of the cosmic calendar?
Yeah, the idea of turning your chart into a calendar. I mean, as astrologers, as astrologers, we'll focus on anything but the sun. I mean, here the sun is kind of like the most important, planet. I mean, meaning, and it comes from the Greek word planetos, which means wandering light. It was in reference to the lights in the sky that moved and the lights in the sky that didn't, which were stars and often featured in constellations. So here the sun, and I've been writing sun sign columns since, I don't know, like Stonehenge, but anyway, for longer than I can remember. But here the sun is almost the thing that you learn the sun and then you skip to the other planets right off the bat. It's just like, I want to get into this asteroid, or I want to get into Saturn or Pluto or something like that, right? And so the sun's kind of like taken for granted, And the thing is, the sun is actually not only the heart of the chart, it's absolutely the heart of the chart. It's the center of the solar system, and without the sun there, all the planets would be, would have left a long time ago. And so, the sun has the same function here in the astrological chart. Now, I think as astrologers, we're often taught, we train our eye for looking at transits, what planets are passing through and things like this. And we forget that or I think we forget, maybe you don't, but what I had proposed that I wanted to write was something that was sun-based. And so the book is designed to sort of like go from the sun sign book, which a lot of people are familiar with, in which you introduce yourself. And I think we're all so grateful that these have been written, especially great classics like Linda Goodman's Sun Signs and Love Signs. I mean, like that's
absolutely.
And then you go into everything else. So there's the sun sign book and the everything else book, okay? And that's where the information, unless you've got, something to follow, can become very overwhelming. But this idea of turning your chart into a calendar came to me when I was thinking of like structures like Stonehenge or Newgrange, structures that were set up in such a way that, like for instance, in the case of Newgrange, it's a mound in Ireland. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with the picture. I've never been. I'm desperate to go one day, but it's like this Neolithic mound in Ireland that its entrance is set up in such a way that for, I think it's 18 minutes on the winter solstice, a dark interior will suddenly become lit because the sun's rays come through the door, and I think they hit off something, or they come through a gate above the door, excuse me, and then they light up the entire interior of this chamber for like 18 minutes, and then it leaves again. And you're not going to have this until winter solstice next year, and that got me thinking. It got me thinking like of churches which have I think they're called median lines, which go across the church, in which the light comes through the top of the church, and the orb will hit actually the zodiac sign on the median line on the day that it's there, and then the sun will move across that very slowly day by day until it hits one equinox, and then it will go back across the median line until it hits the other. And these are marvels. I mean, these are extraordinary things. These are testaments to how much astrology was involved in the church, and that's its own thing. But what I was thinking of is that the astrological chart is just like Newgrange, or it's just like a church which is outfitted to capture the light of the sun. And so, we're used to thinking of, solar returns, and again, changing the chart and making all these rearrangements and things like that. But what about the sun returning to the place in the sky, returning to your season that you were born in? And when the sun does this, this is a period of time when we feel strengthened. It's that light coming through Newgrange on winter solstice and sort of illuminating the entire astrological chart. Okay, and some years, let's face it, some years, like everyone in Newgrange back in 3500 BC or whatever was like, oh, the lights come through, wonderful. But those winter solstices maybe had a cloudy day, or it was raining that day and the light wasn't going to come through, and so that's kind of like, a transiting planet over that light path. Okay, it's kind of like, I'm expecting my birthday, but like Saturn is transiting over my sun, so it's like, I waited all year for this, and all I got was this crummy t-shirt type of thing.
Right.
So all of a sudden it struck me, well, what about if we did this from the natal chart's point of view? Instead of accosting the natal chart with, transiting planets and things like that, what if we made the natal chart our Newgrange? Or what if we made the natal chart our, church in Italy, and they had this median line, and we did everything according to where the sun was traveling around our chart in the year. Okay, and so that offered to me a lot of possibilities in terms of interpretation work and things like this, of just, for instance, you might be born with a Sun-Saturn conjunction, and so every birthday may be that rainy day, right?
Yeah.
But if it's a Sun-Saturn conjunction in an element, okay, in which, let's say it's air, and a couple of months later or whatever, we're going to be in a fire sign, then the sun, having moved to that fire time of year, is actually sextiling or moving what would have been a blocked energy into an open sort of stained glass window, for lack of a better way of saying it. It's the sun peering through that window, and so it sort of lights up that time of year. So the book proposes this. It presents this idea, and so it talks about what it's like to be born in your season. Everyone thinks like, oh, the calendar starts with Aries. Well, the calendar doesn't start with Aries if you're a Libra.
Right.
Your calendar starts in the fall.
Right.
Okay. The calendar doesn't start with Capricorn, or the calendar doesn't start with Aries if you're a Capricorn.
Right.
The year begins, in winter. So where does your personal calendar begin? What's going to be your peak period? I found that that time of year that you're born, the month before your month, the month after, is actually very strong. It's peak. Whereas the 3 months opposite are not, so I call one in season and the other out of season. And so it plays around with the idea that, if you're a Libra, maybe your spring, the time to plant seeds or begin things, is actually the summer, because Libra is going to be your prime time of year, and that you want to wrap things up. I'm doing my modern dancing again. You want to wrap things up in the fall,
Yeah.
as you prepare for that time of year when the sun is opposite you. And so it's furthest away from you and you might not feel as vital, or you might not feel as centered. So these are some of the ideas that the book addresses and works with.
Mm. I love that idea. I love that idea of deconstructing the idea that we follow a traditional calendar year and that we look at our own chart for our calendar, because that when you're right, when the sun's in the opposite sign, those are times when, first of all, when often your solar return chart is at its height, and it's
Right.
not always the easiest because that's fully manifesting, and all the challenges associated with it are in your face. And then also you don't have the light. It's kind of like the things are going dark for you in your own chart.
Right.
So how
away from you as it can be.
Yes, exactly.
50-degree circle.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we incorporate other planets in that inquiry, or other aspects of our chart in that paradigm?
Well, the thing is, the sun is in constant motion. So the sun is going to go and light up different areas of the chart at different times of the year. So it's not stationary, it's not fixed, it's moving around this chart. I think that I like to treat the sun in the astrological chart as the "you are here." Well, if you've gone to Disneyland, it's like, where do you want to go to next, kids? I don't know. Like, where are we even? You are here. Like there's a map that says you are here. And your sun in the chart is the "you are here." Okay, so everything, in my opinion, or the way that I work actually, is going to be relating to the sun. Okay, and I think that sometimes, again, we think of the sun in negative ways. It's like, oh, it's ego, or oh, it's all about itself, and we forget that it's kind of responsible for heat and light and life on the planet, kids. It's like, and that you can start addressing it to things like a day and night chart. You can start addressing it to is the sun rising up to its place? Is the sun coming down from its place? Has the sun handed its light off to the moon? And is she rising, or is she next to the sun? So once you start, for me, it was like, once I started playing around with these different ideas, the chart really kind of opened up, and it was less, in the way that I work, it felt less fragmented and more organic, because it was following, the luminaries, and the moon, of course, if you have a nighttime chart, the moon is probably going to be as strong. She might be stronger than the sun, because I kept wondering why. And writing a column, like a monthly column, weekly column, daily column, you hear a lot from people, and they start saying, you get a lot of things from them. They'll say things like, well, the moon kind of makes more sense to me, than the sun does, or the ascendant does, or I read the sun, moon, and ascendant and see which one, and that got me thinking, well, these are the basics of astrology. These are the basic timekeeping, luminaries in the chart. And I was thinking, maybe they're telling us something, here. Maybe, okay, I'm born under sun sign, that's great, or whatever, but maybe I'm going to identify with my sun sign if I'm a daytime chart more than I would if I'm a nighttime chart, or maybe as a Taurus, I'm actually very optimistic and very pastoral and very, wanting to begin things because my planet is in the spring, and maybe as a Virgo, I'm not really cold and calculated, but actually kind of short-tempered and kind of, heated, and maybe that's because my season is the end of the hottest time of summer, so when you start bringing it back to the calendar and the weather, I think it really speaks to the temperament of the signs a bit more.
Absolutely. So how would you, if you are born in a night chart, then would you give more prominence to the moon in terms of your astrological calendar, or your cosmic calendar?
Yeah, that's a good thing. I'm still working with the sun, and it's not because you patriarchal son of a bitch. No, I'm still working with the sun, and the reason I'm working with the sun is because we are living in a solar calendar. Okay. Now, there were lunar calendars, you know, and there is astrology based on lunar calendars. And so I would be like, you know, do that, you know, if that's your calendar and that's your culture, you know, let's talk about the moon more, you know. But we are telling time here. For instance, in the country, United States of America, we're under a solar calendar. And so that's why I give the emphasis to the sun, only because that became the timekeeper, you know, in terms of the calendar. Now, if I'm Persian, you know, or I'm living in an Eastern country, I'm going to be more, I would imagine I would be looking more at the moon. Like that would be the more important there. But for a night chart, I will begin in a reading, like describing both and sort of figuring out who the person, which of the two luminaries that the person relates to. Chances are it's going to be a mix of the two, because the moon's light is a reflection of the sun, you know, so that's kind of like already inscribed in there. But it's kind of, I feel like I've got much more information and much more material to work with interpretation wise by opening up those ideas.
That makes sense. What about when the sun is in a sign of its fall or its detriment?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the sun is most powerful in the summer, right? You know, and so signs connected to the summer, Cancer, Leo, and Virgo, are going to have a much more, you know, sunbather attitude about life. You know, it's like they're used to the plenty, they're used to the abundance. You know, they can reach out and get a piece of fruit or vegetables or go to farmer's market or whatever, and that talks about a particular you know, prestige, comfort, maybe privilege or whatever about life. You know, sorry, Virgos who are like, no, I'm hardworking or whatever, self-sacrificing. Yeah, but there's still, you know, this kind of like, you know, things come to me like I'm not dealing, I'm coming from a place of abundance. Okay. But if you deal with the autumn signs, okay, where the sun is going down, then light is getting shorter and the shadows are growing longer, there's much more of a kind of growing pessimism about life. You know, Libras are often, you know, sort of painted as like, oh no, they don't get like that. Yeah, they do get like that, you know? And I think that as you go on into the winter, you know, that quality of the autumnal signs of the light that's leaving, I think is very much in the background of all three of them, Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius. So that by the time you get to Capricorn, there's more of a, you know, okay, I'm in hibernation mode, or, you know, long periods of time will go by before I accomplish or show something. So I think it really affects our temperament. And I also think that it affects our approach, and it affects our attitude about things.
Mm. You know, this is reminding me of a talk I heard you give at OPA, a relationship talk, where you were talking about compatibility. And you were talking about, and it struck my memory because again, it was something I had not thought of before or heard of before, but how people with sun signs in the same season tend to do really well together. So, so you could actually use this cosmic calendar in many ways for compatibility and synastry as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, because the thing is, people born in your season are going to get where you're coming from. Okay, because right off the bat, the timing is the same, right? The sun's going to come through your season, enlivening and rekindling and energizing you at the same time as a lover, a boss, a brother, a sister, a child. You know, you're both going to be experiencing that, like, you know, 2 o'clock time in the sun where you go and, you know, sunbathe. You're both going to be experiencing that at the same time. Whereas people not born in your season may be experiencing that as an opposite time of year for themselves. So that's a chillier time, or that's a, you know, they don't feel like themselves or strongly themselves time. And so that can bring up stressors, you know, in terms of that. But yeah, that's where I really was starting to see a lot of that occur.
Yeah, and you know, it's after I heard that talk, I started to look at it at that concept with my clients, and look at it even with my own relationships, and I think it really does make sense. Like realizing some of the people I gravitate toward tend to be more the signs on either side of my sun sign, and
Yeah.
And so I think that there really is that approach makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the thing is, with these techniques in astrology, nothing is supposed to be any better than anything else. It's just, it's like, my husband cooks, okay, not for a living. He's a artistic director of a ballet company for a living, but, you know, at the end of the day, when he's like, ugh, like imagine running a not-for-profit ballet company during this time, you know, so he cooks. This is where he works everything out. But, you know, he doesn't have like one tool that he works with, or one type of food that he's going to make, or one spice palette. You know, it's all these different things. And I think that, you know, one of the things that I enjoy as an astrologer, is that we can take these techniques and then we can play with them, and we can reshape them, and we can recraft them, and we can test them out on our charts and our clients, and our life. We see, like, you know, does something happen or not, or whatever in the sky. But and so, you know, we can think of astrology in different ways, you know, and so that's one of the things. I mean, that's why I always refer to astrology as an art form, you know, more than anything like a science. It's to me, it's the capacity for creativity, in terms of working with the techniques, but also that magnificent creative challenge of interpretation is just endless.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's one thing I love about it too, is just all the different, it opens up your mind and your perspective to be able to see things in a complex, symbolic way.
And to see things that aren't you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You read for someone else, that person has a whole different season from you, a whole different temperament from you. You know, if they have a lot of benevolent aspects in their chart, that's going to set up a temperament that's going to be different from one that has a lot of more challenging or malefic aspects in the chart. That's going to be a different temperament, and not necessarily the temperaments that you would think. You know, people can have a lot of benefics and good fortune, or good fortune has made their life miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And people can have a lot of malefics, and what they've been able to build out of, you know, the ruin, or what's been left, or what went wrong, actually happened to have been the things that have propelled them forward and into life, and to really build and create, you know. So there's a lot of different ways to read these things, and again, that's the beauty of astrology, and its very rich history.
Definitely. Well, I think that might be a good note to close up on. And tell everyone how they can find you, your website, your social media.
Yeah, how can you find me? This is where I show my years. Yeah, how can you find me? I should be able to, like, you know, okay. Rulingplanets.com is my website, and so that's probably the easiest thing, like Christopher Renstrom plus rulingplanets.com. Certainly, Cosmic Calendar is, you know, on Amazon, and you type in that, and then you can get the book. And then, yeah, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. And are there any other thing? I'm not TikToking yet.
Yep.
I guess
Yeah.
that will go up at some point. So
You're on Facebook too? Is that you're on Facebook and
Facebook, Instagram, and that other one, Twitter.
Twitter?
Right.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us and for being a part of our NCGR community.
NCGR community. Support NCGR. It's
Yes,
important.
definitely.
You'd miss it if it weren't there.
Mhm. Thank you.
You're
All right.
welcome.
Have a great day.
Okay, you do too.